All right. So, welcome to the inaugural episode of the Missing the Mark podcast. I'm Graham Salmos. My co host today is Garrick Narowski. And as of today, the trade deadline in the NBA was yesterday. So, that is the first topic that we will be discussing today on this podcast. And we're going to first be talking about the move that everybody is talking about, Drummond to Cleveland, and all that the Pistons got in return or lack thereof. So, firstly, to start, if you didn't know who got traded, it was a second round pick, Brandon Knight, and John Henson for Andre Drummond. So,
hmm
Garrick, is there anything you would like to say before I get started on what I believe thought of this trade?
Well, there's a couple things I think you got to mention. I think people are hating a little too much on the Pistons for this. I think they were kind of given a bad hand with how to deal with Andre Drummond. Simply the fact they don't know if he would re-sign with them or opt into his contract for the next season. So I can understand them being forced to shop around and try to get a guaranteed return. Because I mean, if I were the Pistons right now, I would assume that Andre Drummond's not going to want to spend the rest of his career fighting for an eighth seed in the East and try to play for a team that he actually has a chance at getting a ring. So I don't think he's going to get that in Cleveland. So I don't know how likely he will be to opt into his contract for the next season in Cleveland, especially with how deep in the hole they are in terms of talent and actually having a chance with only having Kevin Love and Colin Sexton really carrying the team right now. I mean, I don't think he's getting what he wants. I don't think the Pistons are getting what he wants. And I think the Cavs are just trying to see if they would be able to re-sign him and just convince him by the amount of money that they have available, since they didn't really give up too much for him. I mean, a second-round draft pick kind of hurts. Brandon Knight hasn't really been consistent since he's been in Milwaukee, and John Henson really hasn't produced much for Cleveland either. So I think it's a safe bet for Cleveland, just trying to see a shot in the dark if they can re-sign him. Pistons, I think they were kind of forced into a bad deal. I don't think they really had much of a choice because they had no guarantee of him coming back.
So, I understand that, and obviously Drummond's value is lowered just based off the impending free agency. However, if you uh, if you're Detroit, I don't get the sense of getting Brandon Knight and John Henson just because that's not building towards the future. Because the whole point of trading Andre Drummond is that you're recognizing that we need to rebuild for the future. John Henson and Brandon Knight don't make sense in that conversation. And the success rate of a second round pick is so low in the NBA
Mm-hmm.
that I don't view second round picks like as anything. You kind of just throw it in there to sweeten the deal.
Mm-hmm.
However, from Cleveland's perspective, I really like this pick because you gave up a couple guys who I don't know if you would even keep for next year had they not been traded. And a second round pick again is nothing. Obviously, there is a potential that you only have Drummond for a couple months and you're not a contender, so it wouldn't have really any value. But still, if you're trying to build, you obviously there's certain like advantages to having a player before they go into free agency because the relationship's already there. And I don't believe in Drummond's case, but there's bird rights too. I don't think Drummond that those are coming with Drummond, but
Mm-hmm.
certain players also have bird rights.
I also think it's important to note that the second round pick is the less favorable uh, of the Cleveland and Golden State 2023 second round pick swap thing from a couple years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm.
So it's going to be the worst of the two, anyways. So it's going to be really not high quality second round pick if there are higher quality ones. What's just interesting to me is um, Drummond tweeted out the other day that there's no friends or loyalty in Detroit, and that he wasn't given any heads up about the deal. So he kind of feels betrayed almost, which is interesting because that makes me almost, the way he phrased it sounds like if they were a little bit more upfront, maybe he wanted to stay. It sounds like he had the loyalty to the team based on the tweet. I know that's a lot. I'm reading in pretty in depth to just one statement, but I don't know. To me, look on the outside looking in, that looks like he would almost consider staying in Detroit. But it sounds like the relationship deteriorated before this, maybe.
Well, I don't blame Detroit for making the trade, and if you're Andre Drummond, I don't honestly know how you didn't expect this to happen, because I feel like this was coming. This was like the trade everyone knew he was going to get. At least they were going to attempt to move him at the deadline.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of there being no loyalty in the league or whatever, it's like Detroit relatively is a lot smaller of a market team than where generally NBA free agents go. Like, when was the last time you heard, ooh, man, the Grizzlies with that big free agent signing, or man, Charlotte, that star player they just got, or like all these smaller market teams, because these free agents like to go to LA, New York, Golden State's obviously had many free agents go there just because they're like high market in terms of not only just basketball but things beyond basketball. And you really don't get that in Detroit. So I don't blame Detroit for not thinking they had a chance in re-signing him.
No, I definitely agree. I think Detroit was kind of had no other choice than to trade him and get guaranteed value for him while he still has. Even though it's declined, I would say, based on how he still has that opt-in choice and opt-out clause for the next season, and then it's free agency, of course. So it's pretty much a really short-term rental. But he's still probably the best rebounder in the league. Still adds a dynamic force on the glass on both the offensive and defensive side of the court. But I'm just surprised Detroit didn't try to get a deal that was more pick-based because, like you were saying, it's in a market where it's not really a hot spot for free agents. So as we've seen in the NBA, those markets are more so forced to just draft well. You can see that well with Milwaukee with Giannis, and I would say OKC when they had KD and Russell Westbrook and Harden, of course. So they had to draft well in order to be those contenders in the smaller markets. I still think that's the best way for small markets to get the best talent is to draft well and develop from what you have. Free agency just isn't still. It's hard to get the big names to go to the smaller markets. I don't think it's because of the media or anything like that. I just don't think they're as flashy or as attractive as a LA or Boston, New York, or Miami, for example.
Well, I'm just shocked that I think there's no way. I don't think any way that was the best offer the Pistons had. How? I just don't, because I feel like if I was a team and I saw that that's all Cleveland had to give up, I would be pretty freaking bitter, especially if I'm a contender, because you could have had this guy, this all-star, and all you had to do is trade a couple of veteran guys in a second-round pick, like, and I say veteran guys, but I don't think Brendan Knight or John Henson they're good. They're not good veteran guys. Like, every team has guys like this that you could trade.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like maybe they should have gone for, like, I don't know, Darius Garland, or there had to be somebody they like. I just don't understand I feel like there was more to be had, but we'll see. We'll see what they do with Brandon Knight, John Henson, and that second round pick.
I don't know. Maybe they're hoping that they can maybe flip them in another year or what, but it's tough to see. I agree. It's tough to see that this was the best deal because if it was, they must have literally just not had anything else. And I don't know how that would happen considering how good Andre Drummond is. And like you said, using him, like even if you're a contender, just signing him or trading for him for the postseason and just using him for the last 30-ish games and the playoffs.
Yep. Well, So now that we know where Drummond has gone, I guess we should talk about where D'Lo and Wiggins went. And I thought it was surprising, the move. I didn't even really expect that move, especially because the Warriors had just signed D'Angelo Russell this offseason. Like, I don't know, but it happened. And
Yeah,
so, what do
that
you
was
think of
big.
that trade?
I was shocked too. Just to give a quick recap of all the pieces involved. So, D'Angelo Russell went to the Timberwolves. They get Andrew Wiggins, that was the biggest haul out of it. They also get a 2021 protected first round draft pick and a 2021 second round pick. And the Warriors also send Jacob Evans and Omari Spellman, to the Timberwolves. The 2021 pick, first round pick, is only top 3 protected. So, not really anything crazy that way. But
Mm-hmm.
that's, I mean, Cat finally gets his best friend in town. That's exciting. If I was a Timberwolves fan, I would be very excited because it doesn't sound like they're going to be fighting for a lower end playoff spot anymore. Because now you should have a pretty tough pairing at your starting guard and um, down low in the post with Cat. So I really don't. I can't. I'm still shocked from this. If I'm being honest, I didn't think that they would be able to get this haul from the Timberwolves. I didn't think that would be the team that would end up coughing up something for D'Lo. I thought
Yeah,
another
really.
team would be maybe more desperate for something, but it's not like the Warriors got a bad deal at all. The Warriors, I mean,
Yeah,
honestly, Andrew Wiggins is a great player.
I mean, I wouldn't go that far.
Well, he's good and he still has the potential. I mean, with how early he was drafted and how high up everyone was on him when he was being drafted, I feel like he never reached that potential in Minnesota. So maybe with Golden State, they'll be able to rejuvenate him in that aspect. And maybe he finds his footing in Golden State and becomes the star that everyone thought he would be when he got drafted so high a couple years ago. But it'll definitely be interesting to see. And the Warriors still also got a first round and second round pick. So they got a pretty loaded class out of it, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I honestly did not hate this pick for either team. Uh, they're obviously, once Clay would come back and once Steph would come back, there's still going to be there was going to be an abundance of guards in Golden State, and forward with Wiggins at small forward replaces a hole that I don't think the Warriors ever truly replaced when KD left. And then if you're in Minnesota, you just got a solid guard that they're both super young players that you can build your team around. So it's not like these dudes had to go to contenders like I thought maybe Andre Drummond did just because he was on the final year of his deal. So my overall wrap up is I like this trade for both teams just because I felt like it filled needs for both teams that instead of and no team overpaid, I guess is what
No,
I would say.
I agree. I think the Timberwolves actually, if I had to pick a winner between the two, I would make the argument that Minnesota actually won the deal. Not that they blew Golden State out of the water. I agree. I think both teams got what they wanted out of it, so it was successful on both sides. But now I think they have a pairing of two young, really talented players in Russell and Karl Anthony Towns. And so now they should be able to retain both of them because how close friends they are. And I don't feel like they're going to be able to get that same opportunity to play with one another elsewhere. So I feel like they almost guarantee that they'll both re-sign with the team as well and try to stay there longer term. So it's both a guarantee of having talent now and for the future, which I think is smart on their part.
Yeah. Speaking of smart on people's parts, how about the Grizzlies getting rid of Andre Iguodala to
I was
the
about
Heat, which I was kind of surprised that Iguodala actually this was one of the teams he had selected that he wanted to be traded to. just because he said he wanted to be traded to a contender. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think I necessarily saw the Heat as a contender. But this is where he's going. And
Mm-hmm.
the Heat got rid of problem child, Dion Waiters.
That's true. They both kind of get rid of problematic players for both their organizations. I mean, Iguodala didn't want to play for the Grizzlies, and I mean, with everything that Morant and some of the other guys were saying in Memphis, they didn't want him at this point with how almost
Mm-hmm.
offended they were by him refusing to play for Memphis. They're like, leave. You want a contender? I mean, and Memphis has got a point. They're fighting for a playoff spot.
Yeah, Memphis is a great young team that, and Andre Iguodala didn't want to play for him because he didn't feel like they had a shot, which is kind of why I don't get the Heat thing because I don't think the Heat have a shot either. But
I mean,
this is
the Heat are good though. The Heat are fourth in the East,
they're
so
good, but there's a difference between being good and having a chance to win it all. Like I think, let's say in a different sport, I thought the Texans this year were good in football, but I never thought the Texans were going to win it all. You know what I mean?
yeah, that's fair. No, I
So
agree. I don't think it's the best team if he's looking just for another ring to his collection, but I just can't see top teams in the East or West giving that much up for him, if anything. Like I can't see the Bucks.
yeah, his contract's kind of. That's what I was also kind of surprised. He immediately signed an extension,
Yeah.
which, I think the Heat got what they wanted. I mean,
Yeah, they
Andre
also
Iguodala
don't
is
forget
still
they
really
also
good
got
player.
the Heat also got Solomon Hill and Jay Crowder from Memphis as well.
Yeah, again, those
Mhm.
are guys with along the lines of John Henson and Brandon Knight.
That's
So
true. And then the Grizzlies also get Dion Waiters, of course, Justice Winslow, who a couple years ago wasn't too bad.
he he's just been hurt. He's only played what 11 games this year.
Yeah, and then he had injury problems last year as well. So it's
Yeah,
tough to really tell how good he still is. I don't want to say still is because he's not that old. It's just that the question is how much of an impact have these injuries had on his output and production? Is he going to be still have that same potential and those flashes of what he could be every so
yeah.
often?
I think if you're Memphis, you might as well just take the shot because Iguodala. Remember, they only took Iguodala this offseason just so that they could get the pick,
Yeah,
just because Warriors need the cap space to sign D'Angelo Russell. So you really just you got a pick, and then you flip the guy who came with the pick for two I would say solid players. I'm not gonna say good or these days are really gonna help the Grizzlies become a high caliber team. No, I think it was good value for being stuck with a player that didn't want to be there.
yeah. And the Grizz also got James Johnson, but that's like kind of similar to Solomon Hill and Jay Crowder. I feel he's only going to be kind of a role player, not really do too much. But
Well, the one thing about James Johnson is he'll actually be passionate about
yeah,
the team. He's gonna be to do that as first get in a fight with his teammates.
but then I think didn't Minnesota? Yeah, Minnesota came in and acquired Johnson from the Grizzlies. So then the Grizzlies got Gorgie Dang back, or not back, got in return. So
Mm,
they ended up with Dion Waiters, Justice Winslow, and Gorgie Yang. So it's not a terrible haul by any means.
no, it's good. It's they made the best I would say out of the situation that they had,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not nearly as complicated as this next trade, which is Capella to
Oh,
Atlanta
yeah,
with
Capella and that
where half the league was involved.
the four-team deal where it was a lot. So We'll go down and break all of this down real quick. So the most explosive part, I think, is, as you mentioned, is Clint Capella went to the Atlanta Hawks, of course. And Houston, the main thing they get in return is they get the Timberwolves' Robert Covington in the deal. The Timberwolves also got 2 first-round picks, which they then moved to the Nuggets for Malik Beasley and Juan Hernangomez. And then Denver got Houston's 2020 first-round pick. Yep, and the Nuggets were supposedly going to try to flip that as well, but with the deadline passing, it didn't look like they could really. Nothing really came out of that. But Minnesota got Evan Turner from Atlanta, and then Jared Vanderbilt from Denver. Denver got Shabazz Napier, Bates Diop, Noah Vonleh, and Gerald Green, all from Minnesota. Houston also gave up Nene to Atlanta. And then they also received Jordan Bell from Minnesota and Houston, and a 2024 second-round pick from Atlanta, which was originally Golden State's. And then Atlanta, in order to clear space, is waiving Chandler Parsons.
Yeah, poor Chandler Parsons.
So that was a lot, but
it was a lot of just switching and swapping of guys. I don't think anybody's going to be a massive impact to the team they go to. And I'll say that for Capella as well, really.
Really, I would say that Atlanta won this trade just simply by the fact of they didn't really have to give up anything crazy. Besides, they just gave up Evan Turner for the most part in a 2024 second-round pick that's not even originally theirs, and a 2020 first-round pick. But
yeah,
getting a good center in Clint Capella, who's shown to be a quality center. They also get a good backup center in that sense. And I mean, they also waived Chandler Parsons, which I'm surprised it took this long to get waived fully with how kind of gross his contract has been for teams. But I don't think it was bad. I think Atlanta picks up a good center, which they kind of needed, and they've kind of just tried a lot of things. They've never really gotten a good quality center ever since they lost Al Horford a while back. So, I mean, they've been trying to use John Collins down at the center, which has kind of worked. They've used Alex Len, who's been, he's not been fantastic to say the least. And now I think he's still hurt, and then they traded him as well now that they have Capella. So I think
I speak for all Atlanta fans when I say that Alex Len is trash and they're happy he's gone.
Yeah. That's very fair. But I think this is good. I think it brings in somewhat of a vet in Capella. At least he has more experience than most of the team in the sense of playoffs and competing when a lot of important games are on the line. So, like when he was in Houston, he's playing for a lot more than what Atlanta has played for the last couple seasons, and that might be a good experience to share with their young core, like Trae Young and especially John Collins. I feel like he should be able to mentor him somewhat. So I think it puts Atlanta in a good space. The rest of the trades, though, nothing jumps off the page.
Yeah,
I mean, for Houston, I feel like they could have gotten a little more for Clint, but
well, I just feel like it was a bunch of trades. Like I said, I don't think any are made that big of an impact. I do agree that Capella's a good player, but in terms of impact, I don't think this is what takes the Hawks from terrible at the bottom of the East to even a playoff team. Maybe I'll be wrong, but that's why it's called missing the mark. Am I right?
Yeah, but I mean, Denver didn't do too bad with getting Bates Diop. I mean, I think that's a good potential superstar. I mean, I'm not going to say he's going to be the best in the league by any means, but he has potential. which
Okay,
is bad. And then they also
everybody, you heard it here. Potential superstar.
no. I think he has potential. I don't know if he's gonna be a superstar.
No,
He will be a good piece for Denver. I feel like he'd be able to stretch the floor a little bit more and give them a good option at one of the forward spots. But then they also got the 2 first-round picks, or the Houston first-round pick for 2020. So it's not bad. Minnesota also got a first-round pick. They didn't really receive any. They received a lot of players, in my opinion. Malik Beasley and Juan Hernan Gomez aren't exciting.
I mean,
And Evan
yeah,
Turner, okay. Jared Vanderbilt, okay.
that's how the whole trade kind of went.
Yeah, that's fair.
But if we're talking about trades, though, even though it was the NBA trade deadline, the biggest trade, arguably, probably okay, it was the biggest trade, was in baseball where Mookie Betts, David Price going to the Dodgers. That so that was an insane trade because not often in any sports do you see a team's best player get traded. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I'll read off the entire trade because there's a lot. There's a lot here. A lot of people going different places because the Twins were also involved. It was a 3-team trade, not purely just the Dodgers and Red Sox, but it's David Price and Mookie Betts to Los Angeles for a package including Alex Verdugo. So and it's a bunch of minor prospects, I believe, and then the Twins get Kenta Maeda from the Dodgers, and they will ship Brustar Graterol to Boston, who's a pitching prospect that the Twins had in their system. And so this is insane because we literally have the guy who finished 8th in MVP voting, so the 8th best player in the AL, gets shipped. Obviously, this is another Drummond-esque situation, just because Mookie Betts kept signing 1-year deals, and it was kind of evident that he did not want in Boston,
Mm-hmm.
and he wanted to move. And if you're the Dodgers, I really like this trade. The Dodgers are obviously the Red Sox also had issues with ownership because they had I forget how many years, 5 years in a row where they had to pay the luxury tax, and so they were tired of that. So they cut David Price's contract and Mookie Betts. That's a lot of money. The
Mm-hmm.
Dodgers were obviously willing to take and spend a lot of money, and this makes. I don't think you can say that the Dodgers aren't the World Series favorites right now with that lineup. It's insane. It's overpowered. The thing is, they still don't have a bullpen, so we'll see. I feel like they're gonna make some moves trying to get somebody in the bullpen. And if you're the Twins, you try and just throw in a prospect, and you got Maeda, which I don't mind at all because that's a solid starting or relieving pitcher, whichever you want to put him in. He's played both roles. And overall, though, it was an insane trade where the Dodgers, I definitely felt like, came out on top just because this makes them World Series favorites. Even if they don't sign Mookie Betts after this year, it's still a really good trade, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you have any thoughts?
I think this is kind of like LA making their last. I don't think it's their last push, but making probably their biggest push to win now. I don't think they really gave up anything I think they definitely won the trade, in my opinion, the Dodgers. Um, like like you said, Mookie and David Price to LA that's big, and that should help to an already explosive lineup with Bellinger and all the other hot bats in LA, and now that they shouldn't be facing teams that are known to be cheating, this could be the year. I know we've said this. This has been said many times before,
Yeah.
especially with the last couple years. But I mean, now the news has comes out that the only thing they were playing was not just a game of baseball. They were also trying to hide their signals because the other teams were trying to read everything they were doing. So it's
Yeah. If you're the Dodgers, though, what you didn't have to give up like some of your top prospects, like your Davin Lux and your Will Smith. It was it was. I think it's a great trade. I think the Dodgers are they're going to be hard to beat because the amount of bats in that lineup,
mhm.
they're loaded. They still have a pretty good farm system, and I think there's good things to be talking about down in LA. But speaking of bad things to talk about, we go over to Houston for baseball, and we're just going to talk about the Astros cheating scandal, and not only just were the ramifications justified, were they enough, but we're also going to talk about how it affects baseball and sports in general as a whole, because this is something we see ever growing in sports. The use of technology. If you talk about if you ask any Premier League fan, the biggest controversy of this year is VAR. You know, and obviously you're not cheating with VAR or anything like that, but still, as
Mhm.
technology is constantly becoming more and more embedded in sports, how do we prevent things like this? Could this be exploited more in other sports? So that's what we're going to talk about with this. That's what we're going to talk about with the Astros cheating scandal. So firstly, going to talk about the punishments. I think it was the largest fines that the MLB has ever handed down, I believe, to the Astros. And then obviously the Astros responded by firing AJ Hinch, their manager, and the Red Sox responded by firing Cora, their manager, who was an assistant with the Red Sox when they won the World Series a couple of years ago.
And the Astros also fired their general manager, if I believe.
Correct.
Yeah.
They Astros cleaned house. Red Sox fired Cora, and so I want to ask, is that the right thing to do? Was it the right thing to do to fire AJ Hinch and Alex Cora?
Oh, absolutely. I think they deserve to like lose their position. I think Hintz arguably could have. I don't know why they were so lax on putting a lifetime ban for that. But I feel like that this, if anything, constitutes a lifetime ban. It's cheating your way to a World Series win in baseball. To me, that feels like the most egregious thing you could do, especially since that they're not. I understand them not doing it, but I think it's also tough because now you have two World Series champions that you could argue there should be an asterisk by their name because what they did was wrong. I mean, they didn't win the game fairly. There's some interesting articles and statistics out about how different the Astros hit that year once they started cheating. I mean, it's pretty incredible how different they hit at home than they hit away. If you think about it, especially between years, to see that jump for some players is kind of it would be abnormal, and I'm surprised that didn't get caught earlier. I mean, for something at least, but I think the punishments in terms of the owner of the Astros or like the Red Sox decisions to fire these individuals was smart, especially the Astros, because if I'm not mistaken, the MLB originally gave them 1 year bans.
Yeah, they had a 1 year suspension, Hinch, and I forget the GM's name, but the
Yeah,
Astros, and
so
then
one
the
year
ownership just
suspension.
came in and tried ended it right there.
I feel like that's probably the best thing for the Astros owner was to fire them both, and then he brings in Dusty Baker, a manager who
I
has some
like
experience dealing with these
Dusty
kind
Baker
of
will get you to the playoffs. How far you go, that's up for debate. We'll see how far they go with Dusty, but Dusty's going to get you to the playoffs. But
No,
let me
I
ask you,
agree. I
was
agree.
the punishment enough? Do you think there should have been more? Do you think the players should have been punished?
That's tough. I I don't know. I feel like the MLB should have been definitely more tough on the manager and the GM of the team in terms of 1 year suspensions. That's a joke. You had someone come in and swindle their way to a World Series win, and it's don't do that. I'll see you next year. That's kind of ridiculous to me. I know they're probably going to be blacklisted, so they're probably not going to get a job. Hopefully, they don't get a job again in the MLB because I feel like that's just their their legacies will always be tainted by this. And I mean, I feel like it's deserved. They ruined the integrity of the sport in an aspect, but I don't know if I could say the players deserve to be punished. That's that's tough because if you're getting it from someone who is in a position above you, say it's coming from your manager, I feel like you're just going to assume that they are doing, you're hoping that they're doing the right thing. Also, it's going to be hard for you to risk your job and go up and say, hey, this is wrong. And then what do they go, cut you and trade you? But I don't know. That's tough. I don't know if I can make a decision on whether or not the players deserve to be punished because at the same time, they were also somewhat complacent in hiding it for this long.
Oh
So
yeah, but
that's tough. I don't know. I have mixed feelings. What do you think about it?
so I think they should have, and here's why. So this is, by all accounts, worse than taking steroids. Straight up. Ask any person that's ever played baseball. And if you had the advantage of knowing what the pitch is before it happens, that's so incrementally larger of an advantage than just taking roids. Like I've seen multiple MLB players talk about how is this not worse than taking roids? You know what I mean? And a roid suspension, I think first offense is like 90 days, or like it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a pretty hefty suspension. Maybe 90 games, but I think you should still implement that for them. The same suspension, just because you were complacent, you knew you were doing so, and even if your coach told you to do so, you also went along with it. It's like you're an accomplice to the crime, even though the boss man tells you so. Doesn't make you any less innocent. That's my opinion, because this is for people that don't really know baseball. They don't understand how much of an advantage this is. Just the reaction time it takes to decipher a curveball from a slider, from a fastball, from whatever. It's extremely hard. So if you can just sit back and know you're automatically going to get a fastball or a changeup or a curveball or whatever, it makes it so much easier. Because all you got to do is like track the ball. You already know what it's going to be. You know how fast it's going to be coming at you. You just got to make sure you get the bat to the ball. Like
Hmm.
I'll try to think of a comparison to like how it would be in a different sport. Like it's almost like if the defense got a live preview of the offense's play in football. Like, hey, slants are coming. You know they're coming. So here's your opportunity to stop it. Like it's like that. It really is. So I do think there should be more punishments, but in terms of do you, how does this impact all of sports, like their involvement with technology? how do they monitor it now? Like, how do you make sure that this doesn't become a widespread thing where technology is exploited in other sports? Like, obviously, with Spygate, technology has been exploited in other sports where they were filming practices and the plays that teams were running. So how do you think other leagues are going to respond to this Astros cheating scandal?
I don't know if the other leagues really can or need to. I just think the biggest threat of technology brings to these other leagues is how you mentioned earlier about the Premier League and VAR. And you can see this in other sports too with the coaches challenge in both the NFL and now in the NHL, that the NHL's new system that they've implemented has kind of been, I don't know if the right word is abused, but the replays can sometimes be a little too picky in my opinion. That's been the biggest complaint about VAR is when it calls back these goals for people being so barely
Yeah.
offside, and that's the same issue that the NHL is having. Is a lot of times when there's goals that can decide the outcome of the game, the coach is just going to call a challenge and see if someone's offside, and they can call back the goal. And so it's been tough because it does reduce some human error, but I think at the same time, you're never going to take away all of it. So the question is, how much do you want to take away? How much power do you want to take away from the officials managing the game?
So the biggest thing with like VAR and all these other replay systems, it's not necessarily that they're being super nitpicky and they're right down to the finest detail. It's the fact that when they introduced them, it was supposed to be egregious errors. You're supposed to fix the obvious things, not this dude's shoulder is barely past the defender's hand. That's offside, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the big, but, and speaking of like, I guess here, where was I going? Where was I going with this? Hold up. All right. Well, I lost my thought completely. I was gonna ask you about something, like, but I guess Oh, I was gonna ask you about MLB, how they're introducing in a lot of the minor leagues, and I think it might be in the spring ball this year's
Robot
the
umpires?
the robot umpires that have the strike zone where the ump on the field just gets a message saying, "Hey, it's a strike," and there's nothing. They don't have. There's no human error. You can't complain because it's the robot. The ump's literally just repeating what the system said. What do you think about that? Is that good for the game or is that bad for the game?
This is tough. I think it's good in the sense that on behalf of the league, I feel like that's what you would want, is you would want robot umpires in the sense, because then there can no longer be those annoying headlines or complaints from players in press conferences or things like that where they go, well, the reason we lost today was because the ump behind the plate was calling them high today or something like that. They now really take away the power of arguing calls in that sense, because now it's like, hey, that's what the machine says. The machine doesn't get it wrong. You're going to have to deal with it. That was a strike. And so now it takes away arguing, which to me, almost is a part of baseball. Like arguing balls and strikes is always something that just comes up. I think it's kind of interesting to see how it'll be with that gone. I don't know if it'll be gone completely, because I can never imagine any batter or pitcher wanting to, when you're in the zone, sometimes you're just going to complain. You think something that the machine doesn't, or I'm sure the machine can still get it wrong, so it'll be interesting to see if it ever deals with situations like that. But I don't know. I feel like from the league perspective, it makes the most sense, because now they take away things that can hurt their reputability in the sense of we have poor officiating, which the MLB, I would say, is notorious for having interesting characters as umpires, such as an Angel Hernandez or a Joe West.
Hey, come on now. It's not fucking NBA where they're getting paid off by the mob to the officiate games a certain way. But I guess to wrap this subject up is just as a former like pitcher, that's what my favorite position was in baseball. This ruling the automated umpires hurts just because as a pitcher you're trying to paint the black. If you consistently hit strikes on the outside corner, you're gonna sublim like and the umpire's gonna start giving you more and more of the outside corner. It's a strategy game, so this hurts the pitcher strategy, and I think it helps the batters just because now you're always gonna know what the zone is. You're locked in. You know what the pitcher doesn't have the ability to influence the umpire by pounding the corners. It has to be there or it's not. So, but I think it's an interesting discussion for all sports too, and the MLB is kind of the first to step out and take that leap of faith. They're testing it, these automated umpires, and we'll see where it goes from there. Maybe it's a terrible idea, but the MLB is going to be the first to try it.
I think the MLB is also if you look across the big four, what other sports can you really see this working as well? Because, the robot umpires are strictly just doing the strike zone. So it's a pretty, it's not a simple thing, but it's going to be the same thing over and over in a sense.
Well, yeah, it's just the entry level thing, though. I do believe that if it goes well, they're just going to take umpires out completely, and that you can just have either someone sitting in a booth and they see all the camera angles, and it might take a little bit for the call to come down, but they'll just send the call down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that could be for all sports. Like, maybe you still need like a actual ref on the field in football to spot the ball, but the person actually telling him where to spot the ball is someone in the booth, you know. But obviously that would be super far in the future, just because no other leagues are doing it besides, and MLB is not really doing it. It's like minor league baseball, and they're seeing how things are going, and MLB might start introducing some ideas. But it's just an interesting topic to discuss for the future of sports. But to wrap things up today, I think we should talk about the NFL draft. Some of the fun things happening coming up soon. The combine's coming up end of February, I believe. So less than a month. And the first thing we're going to talk about here is there's an argument. I think it isn't as valid as maybe other people think so, but the Burrow versus Young, who would you take number one argument. My perspective is take Burrow 100 out of 100 times. I even think Burrow's necessarily this once in a generation quarterback, but still, I feel like if you think he's the top quarterback, a top quarterback, which everyone seems to think so, then you take him number one every single time, just because he is a quarterback. Would you like to share anything on that?
No, I agree. I think in terms of if you're thinking logically about the team that is drafting first, the Cincinnati Bengals, the spot they arguably need the most help is quarterback now. And I think Joe Burrow is definitely someone you can't pass up on. I don't think this argument as much as who are the Bengals going to take. I think it's pretty clear that the Bengals need a quarterback. But, we have no idea if their owner and acting general manager is going to realize that or if he's going to pick up Chase Young, the defensive end out of Ohio State. I think Chase Young is kind of got...
The Bengals need more than just a quarterback, though. They need almost everything. They have... I don't think there's a single position group where I go, this group's average in the NFL. I think they're bad everywhere.
Actually, I
So
would make the argument that their defensive line is probably
it's Geno Atkins though. It's not everybody on the O line's good. I mean the D line's good.
Dunlap
It's
isn't a bad edge rusher. He's proven to be better in the past than he is now, but
and
I
the
think
big thing with their D line, even if I do agree that's the best position group they have, but they're all the good players, at least in my opinion, are on the wrong side of 30. And it's the NFL. You
mhm.
don't stay on the wrong side of 30, especially as a defensive end or tackle, too long. So, but I think it's corporate suicide if the Bengals don't draft Burrow, just because of how how hyped up he's become. Not even by the media and everything, just by this air, like the Southwest Ohio area. They have hyped him up insanely. It's Bengals fans are gonna. It's gonna be a letdown, even if it is Chase Young, and Chase Young is probably gonna be an insane player. But Bengals fans, I still think are gonna like protest if they don't take Joe Burrow.
Mhm. I think what this really helps is anything is probably going to be Washington, because they're probably going to. It's weird to say end up with Chase Young. They're pretty much getting a first overall talent at number 2, simply the fact of there's two. I mean, if you split these guys up into 2 different drafts, I think both of these guys would go number 1 in their respective draft. I think, say for example, if Chase Young was then he declared for the draft next year, or was able to come back to Ohio State for another year.
Not next year. Not next year. He wouldn't be going number 1 next year.
Well, I think you would make an argument for him to go
I
number 1.
think
I think he's a
last year maybe. Uh, no, I think quarterbacks. If there's a quarterback that's really really light, they're always going to go number 1 overall.
that's
Just
yeah. As long as there's the worst couple teams are desperate for a quarterback, because I feel like the NFL just loves their quarterbacks. They really value them in the draft. I think almost to the point where teams have made mistakes where they've drafted quarterbacks. It's not uncommon,
well,
but
yeah, but that's just the biggest thing is if you look at all the teams that are generally that low, it's like, well, why are you that low? And none of them you go, well, we have a above average quarterback. It's always, oh, well, we have Andy Dalton, and we had Case Keenum, and then we decided to throw Dwayne Haskins to the Wolves midway through the season.
mm-hmm.
And then it's like, oh yeah, and we had Matthew Stafford, and then he got hurt, and we were playing an undrafted free agent or whatever from Purdue. Dude, what was that dude's name? Oh, I forget his name. That the Purdue quarterback. But it's like, yeah, I just think that Burrow has to be the pick here. But speaking of other quarterbacks, we're talking about Tua. At the start of the season, remember, it was tank for Tua. Tua's the number 1 overall pick. The Dolphins are tanking for Tua. Um, Tua is so much better than every other quarterback in this draft class, and now that's changed. He's now second. It's not like it's a huge drop off.
Mm-hmm.
Probably still a top 5 pick, but do you is are you at all concerned with the injury, and would you risk it if you're the Dolphins, if your team possibly wanted to trade up? Do you is How concerned are you about the injury, and how does it affect his value?
I mean, I definitely would be concerned because this pretty much this end of the season, the most recent injury, and that scares me. As I think that would scare um, any smart scout or any NFL GM. Is like, you of course want to be precautious because the way he injured himself was coming down. It wasn't that he got. I mean, yeah, got hit by 2 players, but the hit wasn't anything like he got lit up. It was just the way he fell on the ground on his hip, and it obviously caused him a lot of pain, and it took him out for the rest of the season. And I would question mobility then. I mean, how your hip is crucial to a lot of stuff you do as a quarterback. Both the power you can get behind your throws, the mobility in the pocket, things like that, being able to read the field, looking back and forth like that quickly. It'll be interesting. I wonder how he does in the combine because they did say he should be able to throw for that. So I think that will play a big part onto whether or not if he's still up there. Because if he has no problems or masks it, if that, I think the Dolphins would still probably be the team that wants him the most. Still going to be the ones going for him. But if there are problems, I think the combine's where he'll show up. And if you say he drops out last minute because he's like, I'm still not healthy enough for the combine, then I think it could actually take some effect into his value.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, I don't think, even without the combine, I think the biggest thing is by the time it's draft day and all the teams that have his physical, as long as the physical is good and your doctor, your physical therapist on your team doctor goes, yeah, it checks out. I'm confident he's going to make a full recovery, or he's already made a full recovery. Maybe that's the case. And if they give like their seal of approval, I think it's all green lights. Go up and draft him. I think the Dolphins probably are that team, but there's the whole thing too. If I've seen a lot in like recent mock drafts and everything that there's a lot of predictions that the Dolphins trade up to number 3 and the Lions move down so that the Dolphins can secure Tua. And there's also been rumors of like Colts trying to trade up. Maybe Jacksonville tries to get up and get a quarterback. The Chargers, especially with, it seems like all ties are severed with Phillip Rivers. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see. And, you know, it's also interesting because if he comes out and he's really healthy and everyone's like, okay, shoot, then it's game on, and you don't know who's going to come up. There might be some big trades in this draft, and the Lions might be the real benefactors because they're sitting there, and I don't think they're going to go for a quarterback. I think Jeffrey Okudah, the cornerbacks, who in all likelihood they're going to take. So they might get some great value to move down, and maybe it's only like 2 spots to go to the Dolphins, and they can still take Okudah, but then they're going to get all this value just because the Dolphins had to move up. So if you're the Lions right now, if you're a Lions fan, I'd be sitting there at least with some optimism. Even though you are a Lions fan, and it's hard to find optimism.
No, I agree. The Lions are probably in the best spot of the top 3.
Well, I wouldn't say
which
that.
Is hard to say. Like, I don't know. In terms of like trading down and having some flexibility in that sense, I would say that. But it'll definitely be interesting, especially with the Giants in 4. Like you said, the Dolphins in 5th, Chargers in 6th, especially with the Dolphins and Chargers both looking for a quality quarterback. Now that the Chargers split ties with Phillip Rivers, which was surprising to me in a sense. I think we can't keep talking about who they're going to draft without mentioning this. I didn't think Phillip Rivers should have lost his job already. To me, I don't think he's that bad. I think he's a pretty decent pocket passing quarterback. So I feel like they might have jumped the gun a little bit in that sense because I don't know who they're trying to aim for. Because I don't know if I would necessarily say there's a good quarterback.
They're going for Tom Brady, too.
Yeah. But I'm saying I don't know if they have a reasonable chance at a good quarterback because Tua, I feel like, is almost a lock for the Dolphins.
I've seen Herbert to the Chargers a lot.
Herbert.
Yeah, which would be interesting. Well, there's also the whole. There's been theories for now, as there always is, that teams are just going to wait till next year, where you have Trevor Lawrence coming out. Most likely, obviously not confirmed, he'll be a junior, and Justin Fields coming out. Again, not confirmed. He's a junior. Will
Mm-hmm.
be a junior. But there's that potential. And I remember more towards the middle of the season when it looked like, oh my God, the Bengals are worse than the Dolphins. There was maybe the Dolphins are, because the Dolphins have acquired a ton of picks, not just this year, but next year. It was like maybe the Dolphins are just going to do a 2-year tank job. And they don't actually want Tua. They're going for Trevor Lawrence. We'll see. There is always the option that maybe the Chargers just go, because the Chargers O-line sucked too. So they just sit there and they go, we're just going to get a good tackle this year and set up for next year. We're just going to have to convince our team to hold on for a year. And let us take a losing season again this year, which is always risky because it does affect your team's like morale because nobody wants to just sit on a losing team all the time. But there is always that potential that you just wait till next year too, because I think this quarterback class is top heavy. That's just me, but
I agree. I feel like there's limited depth with it. And I think what might happen is maybe a team reaches for a quarterback in the
Herbert.
sense of, I don't know if it would be Herbert
I've
necessarily.
even heard Jordan Love from Utah State, because
That's what I
Jordan
was
Love's a
thinking.
kid that's got all like the measurables,
Mm-hmm.
but the consistency, it's very Josh Allen-esque. Of course, Buffalo's Josh Allen.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see there. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I feel like we're gonna talk about it more as we get closer and closer to the draft. And I kind of want to do like our own mock drafts the week before the actual draft.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how things go. Is there anything you would like to add before we wrap it up?
No, but I think for next week, something we're both excited to cover is the debut, or I guess re-debut, of the XFL. And we'll talk about if we think it will work the second time around, and really just discuss if there can really ever be a successful competitor against the NFL, or are they trying to be a successful minor league system for the National Football League?
Well, if you want to hear that conversation, tune in next week. This has been the Missing the Mark podcast. Don't get bitter if we're wrong, because we're probably wrong. All right. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for listening. Take care.